ballroom glittered with chandeliers and polished marble, echoing the low hum of wealth and power. Billionaire Nolan Grant stood near the back, expression unreadable, watching his son Leo, a boy of 8, visibly tense, sitting rigid in a designer wheelchair. The gala was meant to be charitable, but it felt more like theater. Suddenly, Leo let out a sharp scream, high and jarring. The room fell silent. Eyes turned. Guests stared. A few gasped. Nolan froze, but before he could move, a young black waitress, no older than 30, rushed forward. "It's okay, baby," she said softly, crouching low. Her name tag read, Kiana. She didn't flinch or panic. She extended her hand and gently placed it over Leah's. The boy flinched, then unexpectedly, his fingers curled around hers. A beat of music spilled from the speakers. Kiana smiled and began swaying, slow and rhythmic. "You want to dance, sweetie?" she asked. Leo's eyes darted. One foot shifted. One hand raised. The silence broke as he followed her motion, awkward but intentional. Nolan watched, stunned. His son was dancing. As the music continued, the moment stretched on like a held breath. Kiana didn't look up for approval or permission. She stayed with Leah, guiding, swaying, matching his awkward movements with grace. Nolan's mind was racing. He hadn't seen Leo respond to anyone like this in years. Therapists, doctors, specialists, none had cracked the shell. But this waitress, this stranger, had walked through a minefield of stares and judgment like it was nothing, focused only on the boy. Leo's foot tapped again, then again. Nolan's heart pounded louder than the music. Somewhere deep inside, something cracked open. The moment passed, but it lingered, etched into the room like a scar of wonder. As Kiana slowly pulled back, Leo reached for her sleeve. The boy didn't want her to go. Nolan took a step forward, but still said nothing. The gala's host cleared his throat nervously, and the music faded. Kiana gently withdrew, her eyes never leaving Leah's. "You were amazing, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing a loose curl from his forehead. The room slowly returned to motion, but whispers followed her every step. A senior donor muttered, "Disgraceful," while another said, "That was beautiful." Nolan stepped toward her as she retrieved the fallen tray, but before he could speak, she straightened up and walked away, head high. Leo watched her go, eyes wide. Something had shifted in the boy's demeanor. Nolan glanced back at his son and saw it. Calm. Not sedation. Not withdrawal. Kind. Calm. For the first time in years. Back in the catering corridor, Kiana leaned against the cold tile wall, her chest rising and falling. Her hands trembled. It wasn't fear, more like release. A coworker peeked in and whispered, "You okay?" Kiana smiled faintly. "He's just a kid," she said. Nobody was helping him. The coworker nodded, wide-eyed. "Girl, the whole room was watching you like you were a magician." Kiana laughed once, low and tired. "Nah," she said. "I just danced." Meanwhile, Nolan stood in the ballroom doorway, having followed without realizing. He didn't speak, just watched. And for the first time he wondered not what he could fix, but what he had missed. Later that night, Nolan stood at Leah's bedside, watching him sleep. The boy's fingers twitched in his dreams, as if still dancing. Nolan's mind reeled. He thought of his late wife, how she used to hum lullabies while swaying barefoot across the living room. He hadn't thought of that in years. Looking at Leo now, he whispered, "I saw you today." No reply, of course. But the words mattered. They hung in the air like a vow. Downstairs, Kiana was clocking out. Her name still unknown to Nolan. But he had made a decision. He would find out who she was. Not because she worked magic, but because she saw his son. Nolan sat alone in his sprawling office, city lights glittering through the glass walls behind him. A photo of his late wife, Julia, rested near his hand, her face frozen in a laugh he could almost hear. Leo's outburst at the gala replayed in his mind, but so did the way he reached for Kiana. "Julia, you'd have danced with him too," he whispered. He opened a thick file marked Leo, therapy log. Notes, failed sessions, doctor evaluations, all of it clinical and cold. But one thing was missing: human connection. He pulled out his phone and replayed the silent video someone had captured of Kiana and Leo dancing. No title, no tags, just raw motion. And yet it said more than any diagnosis. Nolan closed the file. Whatever had happened that night wasn't coincidence. It was possibility. And maybe, just maybe, he owed it to Leo to follow that thread. Kiana's small apartment was worlds away from Nolan's sleek tower. She sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by bills and homework sheets. Her daughter, Ava, 7, bright-eyed, brown-skinned, twirled in socks across the floor, giggling. "Mama, look, I'm dancing like you." Kiana smiled, tired but tender. "You sure are," she said, catching Ava mid-spin and pulling her into a hug. For a moment, the weight of double shifts, debt, and old dreams faded. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Nolan Grant. I'd like to talk about Leo." Kiana stared at it for a moment. "Who's Nolan?" Ava asked. Kiana replied softly, "Maybe a door I didn't know was still open." She looked out the window as city lights blinked far away. For years, she'd believed her world was set. Now, it felt like the story had just begun again. The next day, Kiana arrived at the Grant estate, escorted past security by a confused assistant. Leo was in the garden, sunlight dappling the wheelchair's frame. Nolan watched from a few feet away, unreadable as ever. "Thank you for coming," he said stiffly. Kiana gave a half smile. I wasn't sure I should ask," Nolan replied. A silence passed. Then he gestured toward Leo. "He hasn't stopped asking for the dancing lady," he said it twice. Kiana blinked. "He spoke?" Nolan nodded. "The first words he's said in weeks." Something shifted in Kiana's posture. She walked over to Leo, crouched again and smiled. "Wanna show me your moves again, baby?" Leo smiled shyly. His hand moved. Kiana rose slowly and began to sway. Behind her, Nolan's jaw tightened, not with discomfort, but something like awe. By late afternoon, Leo and Kiana sat in a sunroom, music playing from a portable speaker. She taught him to mirror movements, small gestures, slow rhythms. His fingers followed, awkward but precise. Nolan stood just outside, listening to them laugh. Something about Kiana's voice, gentle, unhurried, filled the house in a way that felt unfamiliar. A house once full of silence was now humming. Kiana turned and caught Nolan watching. "You're welcome to join," she said. Nolan hesitated, then stepped in, awkwardly placing a hand on Leo's shoulder. Leo looked up, smiling. Kiana nodded. "That's it," she said. "He just needs to feel safe." Nolan sat beside them. The music played on. And for the first time in years, the Grant family began to move again, together. That night, Nolan walked Kiana to her car. "He's never been that calm," he said. Kiana shrugged. "Kids aren't puzzles. You don't solve them, you feel them." Nolan exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "I don't know how to do that." Kiana looked at him, then said gently, "Then let him teach you." Silence stretched between them. The mansion loomed behind, glowing like a distant planet. "Would you consider working with him more regularly?" Nolan asked. Kiana raised a brow. "Us what? A nanny?" Nolan shook his head. "Us what you are. A teacher." For a moment, the cynic in her wanted to laugh. But Leo's face flashed in her mind. And her own daughter's words. "All right," she said softly. "But I don't do magic." Nolan nodded. "I'm not asking for magic, just movement." Kiana arrived the next morning to find Leo already in the garden, a blanket laid out, music softly playing from hidden speakers. She smiled. Someone's ready to move, she said, kneeling beside him. Nolan stood nearby with a tablet, silently watching. As Kiana began another mirroring session, Leo responded faster now, hand motions sensing more naturally, even adding his own spins to hers. Nolan furrowed his brow. "You're not following the therapy plan," he said. Kiana didn't pause. "That plan talks to his diagnosis, not his spirit." She glanced at him. "He's dancing with me, not recovering for you." The air went still. Nolan looked down, ashamed. "You're right," he muttered. Kiana softened. "You're here. That's what matters." Leo clapped at their exchange, laughing out loud. Nolan stared in disbelief, his son's first laugh in years. The sun seemed brighter suddenly. So did possibility. In the mansion's sleek kitchen, Nolan's longtime friend and board member, Victor Trent, stirred his espresso with thinly veiled annoyance. "A waitress? In your garden? With your son?" he hissed. Nolan stood across the island, arms folded. "She's helping him, in ways no one else could." Victor scoffed. "This could be a PR disaster. You have the foundation ball next month. The press will eat it alive." Nolan's jaw clenched. "Then let them. My son laughed yesterday, Victor." The air cracked with silence. Victor leaned forward. "Careful, Nolan. You're letting sentiment cloud your position." Nolan met his gaze. "Maybe that's the problem. I've had a position. What I needed was a pulse." He left Victor speechless. For the first time, Nolan realized his world of influence wasn't invincible, and maybe it didn't matter as much as he thought. Later that week, Kiana guided Leo into Nolan's private library. The boy's eyes darted around, rows of books, globe bar, old records. "Today," Kiana whispered, "you're the teacher." She handed Leo a remote and let him pick the music. A slow, jazzy tune began. Leo tapped his fingers to the rhythm. Then, with surprising confidence, he turned to Kiana and raised both hands. She followed, letting him lead, turning the movement into dance. Nolan, arriving unnoticed, stopped at the doorway. What he saw wasn't therapy, it was joy. Leo twirled his hands, grinning, and Kiana bowed playfully. Nolan's throat tightened. His wife used to dance in this very room. For a second, he saw her there, dancing barefoot in the echoes of laughter. Kiana caught his eye and smiled. Nolan nodded, a silent thank you. The estate's head butler, Philip, approached Kiana privately as she folded blankets in the side parlor. "Off the record," he began cautiously, "I've worked here 20 years, never seen Leo like this." Kiana smiled politely. He just needed someone to listen differently. Philip hesitated. "Some staff are uncomfortable. They whisper. About you. About what this is." Kiana's face hardened. "They can whisper. I'm not here for them." Philip gave a respectful nod. "That's why he responds. You don't look down on him." Nolan entered mid-conversation, catching just enough. "Anyone who has a problem with Kiana can see themselves out," he said firmly. Silence. Kiana looked at him, surprised. Nolan simply added, "This is Leo's house, and he's already chosen." That evening, Kiana stayed late. Leo had asked her to dance under the stars. Nolan lit the courtyard lanterns himself, something he hadn't done since Julia died. As the moon rose, Leo stood, wobbling but standing, with Kiana's hands steadying him. Step by unsteady step, he moved. Kiana whispered encouragements. Nolan stood beside them now, no longer apart. "You're doing it, buddy," he said, voice cracking. Kiana glanced at him. "He needs your voice more than your money." Nolan nodded slowly. "Then I'll give him both." The boy stumbled. Both adults caught him gently. Leo looked up and smiled. In that moment, under 1,000 tiny lights, the grief, the pride, the fear, it all melted. Nolan didn't just see his son. He felt him. And he wasn't alone in the dance anymore. Nolan walked into the dusty attic, guided by a memory and a need. He sifted through forgotten boxes, until he found it, Julia's old audition binder. a cracked leather folder filled with choreography notes, acceptance letters, and rejection slips. At the bottom, a faded program from the Grand Conservatory. Scribbled on the back, "I chose you, Leo. Always." Nolan sat down hard. He hadn't known. She'd sacrificed her dream for motherhood, something she'd never voiced aloud. He ran his hand over the worn paper, feeling grief twist into guilt. That same afternoon, Kiana shared her own story with Ava on their apartment floor, how she'd auditioned once too. "They said I didn't fit the image," she whispered. Ava hugged her tightly. Two women, two dances cut short by systems too rigid to bend. But one little boy had reopened the door neither of them expected. That evening, Kiana and Nolan sat outside on the estate porch. Between them, Julia's binder. "She could have danced anywhere," Kiana said, turning a page. "She was magic," Nolan replied, voice distant. Then quieter, "I never knew she gave that up for Leo." Kiana closed the folder gently. "She didn't give it up, she gave it forward." Nolan looked at her sharply. "That's what you're doing too," she added. Silence hung for a beat, then Nolan said, "Did you ever think of trying again?" Kiana gave a small laugh. "I stopped dreaming a while ago. Start again," Nolan said. "You're already dancing." The words hung between them, heavier than expected. For the first time, Kiana looked at him, not as an employer or father, but as someone broken, just like her, trying to remember how to hope again. The next day, Nolan stood on the stage of the Grand Conservatory, staring at the empty auditorium. He'd made a call, pulled strings, arranged a private tour for Kiana. She entered the room slowly, reverently, like it was holy ground. "I dreamed of this floor," she whispered. "I wasn't allowed past the lobby." Nolan gestured to the open stage. "You are now." Her hands trembled as she stepped forward, placing one foot on the floorboards. Then another. Her body remembered. She began to move, small at first, then wider, fuller. The auditorium remained empty, but felt alive. Nolan watched from the edge of the curtains, moved beyond words. Kiana danced not to impress, not for an audience, but to reclaim something lost. This wasn't a performance. It was a resurrection. Later that week, Kiana returned to the Grant estate and found a surprise waiting in the ballroom: a new mirror wall, ballet bars, and polished hardwood floors. A single note rested on the stereo: "Leo's studio, teach us both." Tears pricked her eyes. Nolan stood nearby, pretending to scroll his phone. "I thought you could use the space," he muttered. She turned slowly. "This isn't a space," she said, eyes shining. "It's a gift." Leo rolled into the room, face glowing. "Dance time?" he asked. Kiana smiled. "You lead today." Nolan quietly joined them. For the first time, he didn't just observe. He tried. He stumbled. They laughed. And somewhere between the offbeat steps and wrong turns, something beautiful began to take shape: a family in motion. Kiana sat alone in the garden at dusk, watching Ava play chase with Leo. The sound of their laughter filled the air like wind chimes. Nolan joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "I filed for a name change," he said. "The foundation. I'm renaming it the Movement Project. I want to fund dancers who were overlooked, like you." Kiana blinked. "Nolan." He stopped her. "I'm not doing it for gratitude. I'm doing it because I see now what I ignored, what I erased." She was quiet a moment, then nodded. "Then let's build it, from the ground up." He smiled. "Together?" She didn't answer with words, just placed her hand gently over his. In the distance, Ava and Leo spun in imperfect circles, 2 kids dancing under a sky with no ceilings. It had begun. The ballroom was alive with string lights and velvet-covered chairs, preparations for the annual Grant Foundation Ball. But this year, things felt different. Nolan stood at the podium, reading the draft of his speech. "We celebrate not just resources but resilience," he whispered aloud. Leo rolled in, holding a small tie. "You wearing this?" he asked. Nolan knelt beside him, tying it gently around his son's neck. "Only if you lead the first dance." Leo beamed. Outside the door, Victor Trent listened quietly, lips pursed. He turned to another board member. "He's unraveling our brand with every step," the man replied, "or rebuilding it." Inside, Kiana adjusted stage lights for a surprise performance. She didn't know Nolan had added her name to the program. Choreographer, Kiana Brooks. That evening wasn't just a gala. It was a test of everything they had become. As the ballroom filled with guests in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos, whispers floated from table to table. "That's the waitress, isn't it?" one donor murmured. Another added, "I heard she's choreographing tonight's showcase." The murmurs didn't stop Kiana. She stood backstage, heart pounding. Nolan approached, adjusting his cufflinks. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she replied. "Good," he said. "It means it matters." Meanwhile, Victor cornered several board members near the bar. "If this goes south, we vote to remove him. Tonight." The others nodded hesitantly. The music swelled. Nolan took the stage, voice steady. "Tonight we celebrate movement, not just in dance but in hearts, in minds, in legacy." The room quieted. He paused, looking directly at Kiana in the wings. "And the person who taught us all how to move, she's next." The spotlight hit the center of the ballroom. Kiana stepped out, flanked by 4 young dancers, 2 disabled, 2 from underserved neighborhoods. As the first notes of a slow orchestral piece played, the dance began. Every movement was raw, imperfect, human. Leo rolled in from the wings, joining mid-routine. The crowd gasped. He raised one arm, then the other, mimicking Kiana's lead. No one spoke. No one breathed. When the music paused, and the dancers froze in a final tableau, the silence cracked into thunderous applause. Even Victor was on his feet, reluctantly but there. Nolan stood at the edge of the stage, hands trembling. He hadn't known what to expect, but what he saw was no performance. It was revolution. And Kiana, centered, radiant, was the heart of it. Backstage, breathless and sweaty, Kiana collapsed onto a chair. Leo wheeled up beside her. "We did it," he whispered. She nodded, tears breaking loose. Nolan appeared, uncharacteristically shaken. "I need to show you something," he said. She followed him to a side room where a copy of the program lay open. Her name, choreographer Kiana Brooks, printed in bold. "You earned it," he said. "You built it." Kiana touched the page like it might vanish. "I never thought I'd see my name in something like this." Nolan shook his head. "Then the world was blind. I'm just catching up." He took a breath. "And if you'll let me, I want to keep building. With you. Publicly. Personally." She looked at him, stunned. "Is this about gratitude?" Nolan answered, "No, it's about love." Nolan stepped back into the ballroom and faced the board members head on. Victor stood, ready to pounce. "You've compromised our image, our funding," he began. Nolan cut him off. Our image was sterile, soulless. We didn't lose value tonight. We found purpose." Murmurs spread. Nolan turned to the guests. "I'm stepping down as sole director. The foundation will be co-led moving forward by someone who knows the dance of struggle and triumph better than I ever will." He extended a hand. "Kiana Brooks." The applause roared louder than before. Victor sat down slowly, defeated. Kiana stood frozen for a moment, then stepped forward. The lights caught her face, strength, grace, fire. In that moment, she didn't just enter the room. She claimed it. Months passed, and the movement project became more than a dream. It became a living, breathing space. In a repurposed downtown warehouse, sunlight now spilled across sprung floors and mirrored walls. Children of every background filled the studio. Some in wheelchairs, some in braces, some with nothing but raw spirit. At the center stood Kiana, leading them all through a warm-up. Nolan watched from the office window above, coffee in hand, heart full. Leo sat on the sidelines, scribbling in a sketchbook labeled Choreo Ideas. Ava danced beside kids twice her size, fearless. The air buzzed, not with pressure but purpose. "We're not fixing them," Kiana had said once. "We're giving them room to be whole." And here, in this sunlit sanctuary, that promise echoed off every brick wall. For the first time, Nolan didn't just fund something. He believed in it. One afternoon, Nolan sat across from Kiana in the break room, papers spread between them, sponsorships, grant forms, and growing outreach requests. "We're already 3 months ahead of projections," she said, stunned. Nolan smiled. "People are watching. And more importantly, they're listening." She paused, fingers grazing one form. "We just got a request from the conservatory to collaborate." Nolan raised his eyebrows. "The same one that turned you away?" She nodded. "They want to expand representation." Kiana's tone was dry, amused. Nolan leaned in. "We don't need their stage, but maybe we show them what a real one looks like." She smiled slowly. "Let's make space for kids who've never even seen a curtain rise." Outside the door, Leo practiced a step sequence Ava had taught him. Legacy wasn't a name anymore. It was motion. That weekend, Kiana brought Ava to visit Julia's grave for the first time. She made space for a boy who couldn't speak, Kiana told her daughter, kneeling to straighten the wildflowers. "And because of her, we found each other." Ava placed a folded drawing on the grave. Stick figures dancing under stars. "Do you think she can see us?" she asked. Kiana wrapped her arms around her. "I think she's the reason we're even standing here." Across the cemetery lawn, Nolan waited, giving them space. Leo sat beside him, holding Kiana's dance shoes in his lap like a gift. The silence wasn't heavy, it was full. Respectful. Sacred. The past had carved its pain. But now, it made room for grace. They didn't come to say goodbye. They came to say, thank you. Weeks later, the studio hosted its first community showcase. Families packed the room, cameras ready. Leo stood in the center, visibly nervous but determined. Kiana placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's your time." The music started, an original piece Leo and Ava had choreographed together. His body moved with effort, grace, and intention. Ava danced beside him like a guide and partner. The crowd held its breath. Nolan wiped a tear from his cheek. This wasn't just a routine, it was a declaration. Leo, the boy once silenced by trauma, now told a story with every step. When it ended, the applause was thunderous, but Leo only looked to one face, Kiana's. She smiled and clapped, mouthing, "You did it." And in that moment, he stood taller than he ever had before. That night, as the studio emptied and lights dimmed, Kiana remained alone in the center of the floor. She slowly began to move, not rehearsed, just letting her body speak. Each spin, each breath, told a story of pain survived, love found, purpose reclaimed. Nolan entered quietly, not wanting to interrupt. But Kiana saw him. Without words, she extended a hand. He stepped in, hesitant. They began to move, awkwardly at first, then with unspoken rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Two people who had once been lost, now moving forward. When the music ended, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. Outside, Leo and Ava peeked through the glass, giggling. Are they dancing or hugging? Ava whispered. Leo grinned. Both. And just like that, the night closed. On connection, not conclusion. The Movement Project's grand recital filled the city theater to capacity. Parents, press, donors and dancers all gathered, the lobby buzzing with nervous energy. Backstage, Kiana checked final cues, clipboard in hand, hair pinned, gown flowing. Leo sat in a quiet corner, eyes closed, earphones in. Ava squeezed his hand. You're gonna own that stage. Nolan peeked in, adjusting his tie. All good. Kiana gave a tight smile. It's not about being perfect, it's about being seen. The curtain call loomed. Lights dimmed. The music cued. Places, someone shouted. Kiana placed her hand on Leo's shoulder. Remember what I told you. Leo opened his eyes and nodded. Dance like the world needs your voice. The curtain began to rise. This time, no one ran to rescue him. He would lead the first step. The curtain opened on darkness. A single spotlight fell on Leo, center stage. Silence. Then music swelled, soft, sweeping, full of longing and rise. Leo's hand moved, then his arm. From the wings, Kiana watched with her heart in her throat. Leo spun in place, his wheelchair gliding with precision. One by one, the other dancers joined him, forming a circle, their motions rippling outward like echoes of Leo's lead. Ava danced closest, sensing with his every gesture. The audience was still, awestruck. Nolan leaned forward, hands clenched. Every beat told a truth the world had tried to silence. This was no performance. It was a revolution in grace. Leo hit the final note, lifted both hands and smiled. The curtain began to fall as the music faded. And in that breathless pause, before applause exploded, the world changed. Backstage erupted in joy. Dancers hugged. Parents wept. Leo rolled off stage and straight into Kiana's arms. "You were incredible," she whispered. "I felt it," Leo said. Nolan arrived seconds later, crouched to eye level. "You didn't just dance. You told a story only you could tell." Leo looked at them both. "Can we do this forever?" Kiana smiled. "We already are." Nolan reached out, pulling them both into a hug. "Next year we bring this to other cities. Kids everywhere need this." The studio, the name, the journey, it wasn't ending here. It was multiplying. Behind them a journalist snapped a photo, whispering to her colleague, "That kid, he didn't just move, he moved us." And somewhere in that blurry flash, a new narrative was born. One that couldn't be ignored. Weeks later, a mural went up on the side of the Movement Project's new downtown building. Leo mid-dance, Ava beside him, Kiana silhouetted in guidance behind. It stretched 2 stories tall, painted in bold colors that demanded attention. The city stopped to stare. "That's the kid," someone whispered. "That's the woman who changed everything." Inside, Kiana ran a workshop for teens from 3 different boroughs. Nolan handled admin at the front desk, wearing a t-shirt with the mural on it. Leo, now a mentor, helped a nervous boy through his first sequence. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to be loud to be heard." This was more than a center. It was a movement. And its leaders. Not polished. Not perfect. Just deeply human. And deeply unstoppable. In a quiet moment after class, Kiana stood alone in the studio, lights dimmed, the room still. Nolan approached with 2 cups of coffee, handing her one. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Just taking it in." From the corner, Ava and Leo rehearsed a small routine, their laughter echoing softly. "You did this," Nolan said. Kiana shook her head. "No, we did this. Because one night, a boy screamed, and I didn't walk away." Nolan stepped closer. "And I saw him for the first time." They stood in silence, shoulder to shoulder, watching the children move freely across the floor. "What's next?" he asked. Kiana didn't answer with words. Instead, she crossed the floor, held out her hand, and Nolan followed. The final scene faded, not with applause, but with motion. And love. And something that would never stop.